She was just a waitress. He was a man the entire city feared and dared not even mention. Yet a simple cup of coffee brought these two together and thrust them into a battle neither of them was prepared for. When love clashes with ultimate power, who will fall first? Don't go anywhere. Hit like now, and comment the city you're viewing from, so I know how far this story has come. Evelyn and Lucien's journey begins now. The cafe smelled like burnt milk and old grease, and the particular exhaustion of people who had nowhere better to be at 7 in the morning. Evelyn Hart had been on her feet since 5:15. Her lower back had started its familiar protest around 6, that deep, grinding ache that climbed her spine like something with claws, and she'd learned years ago not to think about it too hard or it would spread. You gave pain an inch and it took everything. That was the first thing her mother had taught her before she'd taught her anything else, and it was the only lesson that had ever actually stuck. She was wiping down the counter when the door opened. She didn't look up. The bell above the door had a dull, defeated sound to it. It hadn't rung properly in months, just made this flat little click that was barely worth registering, and most of the people who came in at this hour were regulars. Tired men in work clothes, women with that particular set to their jaw that said they'd been awake since before anyone should be awake. Students who looked like they'd just stopped pretending to sleep and decided coffee was the more honest choice. She heard the footsteps first. That was the thing she noticed before anything else. Most people coming into the Anchor shuffled. They dragged. They moved through the door the way people move when the morning has already beaten something out of them. These footsteps were different, measured, deliberate. The kind of footsteps that belonged to someone who had decided exactly where they were going before they took the first step. She looked up. The man standing at the entrance wasn't wearing anything that screamed money exactly, but money was in every detail if you knew how to read it. The coat was dark and cut close, and the fabric had a weight to it that didn't come from any department store. The shoes were spotless in a way that told you someone else's job was keeping them that way. He was tall, not absurdly so, but tall enough that the low ceiling of the Anchor seemed to register the fact of him. Dark hair, close cut. A jaw that had been designed, Evelyn thought vaguely, to make people uneasy. He looked at the room the way a man looks at a chessboard when he already knows 3 moves ahead. Then he looked at her. "Sit anywhere," she said, and went back to wiping the counter. She heard a brief pause, a half second of something she couldn't quite name, and then the footsteps moved again. He chose the stool directly in front of her. Not a booth, not a table in the corner. The stool at the counter, with its cracked vinyl and the wobble in the left leg she kept meaning to report to Danny and kept forgetting about. She gave the counter one last pass and tossed the rag over her shoulder. "What can I get you?" It wasn't really a question. She'd stopped making it a question around the 4th year of this job. "Coffee," he said. "Black." His voice was low and even and carried the kind of calm that isn't relaxed so much as controlled. The difference mattered. Relaxed meant you weren't thinking about much. Controlled meant you were thinking about everything and had simply decided not to let any of it show. "We've got a house blend and a single origin from Guatemala," she said. "House is better." He looked at her. "Is it?" "The Guatemala is supposed to be the special, but Danny buys the cheap bags and roasts them wrong. House is just house, but at least it's honest." Something shifted in his face. Not a smile, exactly. More like the idea of one, considered and then set aside. "House, then." She poured it. Didn't make a production of it. Didn't do the thing where you hold the cup up to the light to check the color or whatever. She poured it, set it in front of him, and went back to the prep work she'd been in the middle of. He drank it without looking at his phone. That was unusual enough that she noticed it. Everyone looked at their phone. It was basically the law at this point, but he just sat there with the cup in both hands and looked at the middle distance, and there was something in the quality of his stillness that made Evelyn think of a very large, very patient animal that had learned to wait. She refilled his cup without being asked. He glanced up. "You didn't ask if I wanted more." "You were going to ask in about 30 seconds, she said. "This saves us both the trouble." He looked at her for a moment. Really looked, the way people rarely bothered to look at service workers. Not through her, not past her, but at her. It was uncomfortable in a way she couldn't immediately categorize. "You do this every morning?" he said. It wasn't a question either. 5 days a week, 6 when Danny's short-staffed. which is often. Which is always. She restacked the sugar packets that didn't need restacking. You passing through, or is this going to be a regular thing? I haven't decided yet, he said. He left a 50 on the counter for a $4 coffee. She almost called after him about the change. Almost. She looked at the bill for a moment, then tucked it into the register and went back to work. She didn't think about him again for the rest of the shift. Or she tried not to. The trying was the part that stuck with her on the bus ride home, the part that followed her up the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment, the part that was still there when she lay down on her bed without taking her shoes off and stared at the water stain on the ceiling that had been growing since March. She'd seen a lot of men come through the anchor. She'd learned to read them the way you learn to read weather, not because you could stop what was coming, but because knowing it was coming gave you a half-second to brace. That man hadn't read like anything she had a name for yet. His name was Lucien Moretti, though she didn't know that then. If she had known the name, she might have known the rest of it. The Moretti name wasn't the kind of name you could escape in this city if you paid any attention at all. It was in the architecture of certain blocks downtown where 3 buildings had gone up in 18 months. It was in the whispered explanation for why a particular city councilman had reversed a zoning vote he'd been vocal about for 2 years. It was in the faces of people who worked in the financial district when they said it, the way they said it carefully, like they were picking up something that might cut them. The Moretti family had been in this city for 60 years. They'd arrived with nothing and built something. What exactly depended on who you asked and how much they trusted you. The legitimate story was real estate, private investment, logistics. The other story was older and messier, and not the kind of thing people put on record. Lucien was 38 years old. He'd taken control of the family's interests 6 years ago when his father, Aldo Moretti, had died of a stroke at his desk in a building that officially didn't exist in the family's portfolio. He'd inherited a machine. Not a corrupt one, exactly, or not simply corrupt, but a machine built on relationships and obligations and old agreements that had calcified into something that looked almost like law. It ran itself in many ways. His job was to keep running it while simultaneously, quietly, methodically, trying to dismantle the parts of it that would get him killed or imprisoned if the architecture ever shifted under him. It was, he had once told his lawyer in a rare, unguarded moment, like trying to replace the foundation of a building while people were still living in it, while some of those people were actively trying to stop you, while others didn't know the foundation was the problem and would fight you for touching it. He came back to the anchor the next morning, and the morning after that. By the 5th day, Evelyn had him mapped. She didn't do it consciously. It was just what happened when someone became a pattern in your space. You noticed the small things. He always took the same stool. He always ordered black coffee and always accepted the refill before he asked for it. He never looked at his phone while he was drinking, but he checked it twice before he sat down and once before he left. Always in the same sequence. A brief scan. A pause. The phone back in his coat pocket with a finality that suggested whatever he'd seen had been processed and filed and was no longer something he needed to carry visibly. He tipped exactly $50 every morning, which was insane. She tried to give it back the second day. "I'm not taking $50 for a $4 coffee," she'd said, and slid the bill back across the counter. He'd looked at her with something that was almost surprise. "Why not?" "Because that's not how things work." "How do things work?" "You pay for what you get," she said. "I gave you coffee. You give me $4. "I'm paying for the honesty about the Guatemala beans," he said. That was worth considerably more. She'd stared at him. He'd looked back with that same flat, measuring expression, and she'd realized with a small internal jolt that he was completely serious. "That's ridiculous," she said. "Leave it as a tip then," he said, and picked up his cup. She left it. But it bothered her in a way she couldn't entirely explain, some principle being bent that she hadn't even known she had. On the 5th morning he came in, he wasn't alone. There were 2 of them, men who positioned themselves at the booth nearest the door and the table near the back in a way that was too deliberate to be accidental. They were wearing civilian clothes, but wearing them wrong, the way athletes wear normal clothes. Like the fabric was always slightly at odds with the body underneath. They didn't order anything. They just sat there and watched the room. Evelyn poured Lucien's coffee without commenting. "Friends of yours?" she said. Associates, he said. They want coffee? No. They're taking up table space. I'll compensate Danny for it. Danny's going to want to know who you are, she said, leaning on the counter. It was the most direct thing she'd said to him in 5 days, and she watched to see if he'd flinch from it. He didn't flinch. He looked at her steadily and said, Does it matter? Might. My name is Lucien Moretti. He said it the way you say your own name when you've had a very long time to watch what it does to people. Carefully, watching for the seismic shift. Evelyn picked up a clean cup and started polishing it. Is that supposed to mean something to me? The silence that followed was a specific kind of silence. She'd learned to recognize it later, that particular silence that happened when Lucien Moretti encountered something he hadn't expected. It was short and contained, and it ended exactly when he decided it would end, which was before most people would have noticed it existed. To most people in this city, he said, yes. I'm not most people in this city, she said. You want a refill or not? He held the cup out. The morning everything changed started like every other morning, which was something Evelyn thought about later. The way catastrophe always had that quality, ordinary right up until the moment it wasn't. She was unlocking the anchor at 5:10, bag over one shoulder, keys in her left hand because her right hand was still fighting the stiffness that had started in her knuckles the previous winter and hadn't fully left. The street was mostly empty. A delivery truck 2 blocks down. A woman walking a dog that was more interested in a trash can than in walking. She heard the car before she saw it. Not because it was loud, the opposite. It was that specific silence of an engine running too well, too quietly, the sound of serious money applied to serious engineering. It stopped at the curb beside her. The window came down. Lucien was in the back seat, and there was something different in his face this morning. Not the controlled stillness she'd come to associate with him. Something underneath that. A tension that showed at the jaw, at the corner of one eye. Get in, he said. She turned to face him fully. I'm not getting in a strange car at 5 in the morning. I need to talk to you. We're talking right now. Not here. His voice had an edge to it that was new. The control was still there, but something was pressing against it from underneath. Please. She'd heard that word from him exactly once before. She'd said something sharp about the bodyguards and their habit of making her regulars uncomfortable, and he'd said, please, take the table by the window instead of their usual spots, with a particular gravity that suggested, please cost him something. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the anchor's front door. The morning prep wasn't going to do itself. Danny would be in by 6 and would have specific opinions about the state of the espresso machine. There were 100 ordinary reasons to turn around and put her key in the lock. You've got 10 minutes, she said. I need to be inside before 6. She got in the car. The car moved. I have a proposal, Lucien said. He was looking straight ahead. The city slid past the tinted windows and gray morning shades, the street still half asleep. I don't do proposals before coffee, she said. Something in his face shifted, the tension cracking just slightly into something that was almost a smile. Then it was gone. I'm in the process of restructuring significant portions of my operation, he said. I have meetings, frequently, in locations where the environment matters more than most of my associates understand. He paused. I need someone who understands coffee. She looked at him. You want to hire me, she said, as a private barista. The position is full-time. The pay is... He named a figure that she processed in 2 stages. First the number, and then the understanding of what the number meant, what it would mean for the lease she was 2 months behind on, for the medical bill she'd been moving from drawer to drawer like it would dissolve if she stopped looking at it long enough. She kept her face neutral by sheer force of the same practice that kept her back pain from showing on her worst shifts. Why me? She said. You told me the truth about the coffee, he said, on the first morning. You didn't know who I was, and you told me the truth anyway. He turned to look at her, and she felt again that uncomfortable quality of his attention, the sense of being seen with genuine precision. That's rarer than you'd think. Lots of people are honest, she said. Not to me, he said, and there was something in it that was so stripped of self-pity, so factual, that it landed harder than any complaint would have. She looked out the window. They'd circled the block, she realized. They were back in front of the anchor. The driver, one of the silent, competent men, was waiting. "I'll need to give Danny notice," she said. 2 weeks is acceptable." "I haven't said yes yet." "I know," he said. She looked at him for a moment, at the jaw and the controlled stillness and the thing underneath it she still couldn't name but could feel the edges of now, like reading the shape of something under cloth. "I'll call you," she said, and got out of the car. She stood on the sidewalk and listened to the car pull away. The morning was cold, and her knuckles ached, and somewhere in the distance the delivery truck was backing up, that rhythmic beeping that meant ordinary things proceeding in ordinary ways. She put her key in the lock. She knew already what she was going to call and say. The knowing of it sat in her chest like something she'd swallowed. Not excitement, exactly. Or not only that, something more complicated. The particular feeling of standing at the top of a staircase in the dark and knowing the first step is there somewhere and not being entirely sure how far down it goes. Her phone buzzed. Not Lucien's number. She didn't have it yet. A number she didn't recognize at all. The text was 3 words. "Don't take it." She stared at it. She looked up and down the empty street. The car was gone. There was no one in either direction that she could see. Just the woman with the dog, half a block away now, not looking back. She looked at the text again. 3 words. She put the phone in her apron pocket and pushed open the door and went inside to start the coffee. She was still thinking about it 2 hours later when Danny came in, and she told him she was giving her notice. She called the number back at 8:15, standing in the alley behind the anchor with a cigarette she'd bummed from the line cook even though she'd quit 2 years ago. The number rang 4 times and went to a voicemail that wasn't set up. Just silence and then the tone. She hung up. She smoked the cigarette down to the filter and ground it under her heel and went back inside and didn't think about it. Or tried not to. The trying was becoming a habit where Lucien Moretti was concerned, and she wasn't sure she liked what that said about her. She called the number he'd had his assistant send her at 9 that evening. Short conversation. She said yes. The voice on the other end, not Lucien, a woman named Claire who spoke with the measured precision of someone who had spent years anticipating problems before they arrived, told her she'd receive a packet of information by courier the following morning. Dress code, access protocols, a general overview of her responsibilities. She said she understood and hung up and sat in her apartment in the dark for a while without turning any lights on. The unknown number didn't text again. The packet arrived at 7:50 the next morning, before she was fully dressed. A young man in a plain gray jacket with no markings on anything, no company name, no logo. He handed her a sealed envelope, made eye contact once to confirm she was who he was looking for, and left without saying a word. Inside was a single-typed sheet of paper, a key card in a small sleeve, and a hand-drawn map that turned out to be unnecessary because the address was specific and she knew the building. Everyone in the city knew the building. The Moretti Tower was 42 floors of dark glass on the north end of the financial district, and it was the kind of building that didn't need a sign because anyone who needed to know what it was already knew. The sheet of paper had 7 lines. Hours. Location. Equipment that would be provided. A line that read, "Dietary restrictions of regular attendees will be communicated in advance." A line about confidentiality that was 1 sentence long and dense with legal language she'd need to read 3 more times before she fully parsed it. And at the bottom, the figure she'd already mentally moved money around to accommodate. She folded it, put it in her bag, and went to give Danny her keys. The elevator in the Moretti Tower required the key card for the upper floors. Evelyn pressed it to the reader on her first morning and felt the slight mechanical shift of access being granted, a sound so small and deliberate that it felt like a statement. Floors 30 through 42 were Moretti operations. She was going to 31. The kitchen, if you could call it that, was a narrow room off the main conference corridor, fitted with equipment that cost more than everything Evelyn owned combined. She stood in the doorway and did a slow survey. A La Marzocca espresso machine that she'd only ever seen in photographs, a burr grinder set up for single dose, 3 different pour-over apparatuses, a small refrigerator stocked with milk alternatives arranged by fat content, A shelf of beans with labels she recognized from specialty roasters across the country, and two she'd never seen before that turned out, when she checked later, to be imported directly. Miss Hart, she turned. Claire was in her 40s, dark-haired, wearing a jacket that said she hadn't bought it in this country. She had the look of a woman who had navigated a very specific kind of difficult environment for a very long time and had developed an economy of expression as a survival mechanism. No wasted words, no wasted gestures. The Tuesday meeting starts at 9 sharp, Claire said. There will be 7 attendees. Mr. Moretti takes his black. Marcus Reeve takes a double espresso, no exceptions, and if it runs long, a second one without being asked. The Hayashi brothers drink only pour-over medium roast, and they will comment on the grind if it's off. She paused. It is always worth your time to make sure the grind is not off. Understood, Evelyn said. You'll hear things in those rooms, Claire said. That's unavoidable. The confidentiality agreement covers it, but I'll tell you plainly what the agreement doesn't say. Discretion here is not a legal concept. It's a survival one. She let that sit for a moment. Any questions? She said. Evelyn thought about the text. Don't take it. 3 words from a number that had never responded. No, she said. The Tuesday meeting was about port logistics, or that was the frame. Evelyn moved in and out of the room 3 times in 90 minutes. First delivery, mid-meeting refill, final service, and each time she was in there long enough to catch fragments of conversation that assembled themselves in her mind the way overheard phone calls do. Incomplete, but suggestive. Marcus Reeve was a large man with a face built for intimidation, the kind of face that had probably stopped being accidental around age 30 and had since become deliberate. He sat to Lucian's left and spoke with the quiet certainty of someone who expected pushback and had already discounted it. The Hayashi brothers, Ken and Ryo, she'd learn, sat across from each other rather than side by side, which she noticed because it was unusual, and which she'd come to understand later was the way they always sat, a habit from childhood that had something to do with reading a room from 2 angles simultaneously. Lucian sat at the head of the table and ran the meeting the way he drank his coffee, without waste. No filler language, no performing for the room. He listened more than he spoke, and when he spoke, the room recalibrated. He didn't look at her when she brought the second round. She didn't expect him to. It wasn't that kind of arrangement. But on her way out the 3rd time, she heard him say a name that she hadn't heard before, and that lodged in her anyway. Varro. Said in a specific tone, not anger, something more careful than anger. The tone of someone naming a problem they are not yet sure they can solve. She went back to the kitchen and cleaned the equipment and didn't write anything down because she wasn't that kind of person. But she thought about it. 3 weeks in, then 4. The days had a pattern now, which was both a comfort and a slight unease, the way any pattern became a kind of vulnerability. She knew the meeting schedules. She knew who took sugar and who would never say they did, but would accept it if it arrived. She knew that the 3rd-floor conference room had a ventilation problem that made the northeast corner 2 degrees colder than the rest of the space, and that Ken Hayashi always angled his chair away from that corner without seeming to notice he was doing it. She knew that Lucien came in every morning at 6:45, and that he went to the kitchen on 31 before anyone else arrived and stood at the window with a cup she'd started leaving ready for him, prepped the night before, and kept in the small warming drawer she'd identified on her second day. She hadn't planned to be there the first morning he found it. She'd come in early to adjust the grind profile for a new batch of beans, and she was behind the machine when he walked in. He stopped, looked at the cup in the drawer, looked at her. "You were here last night," he said. Stayed late to set up for the Thursday breakfast meeting. She was checking the drip tray and not looking at him. "Cup's been in the warming drawer since 8. Should still be right." He picked it up, drank, set it down, said nothing for a moment. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "It's my job to make sure the coffee's good," she said. "Cold coffee from a warming drawer after 11 hours is not good. I adjusted the profile so it holds longer." She paused. "It's a chemistry problem, not a favor." She heard him set the cup down. When she looked up, he was watching her with that particular attention that still made her feel like something was being measured. "Why did you take this job?" he said. "You offered it." "That's not an answer." She straightened up. looked at him directly because she'd learned early that looking away from Lucien Moretti read as something she didn't want it to read as. "The money," she said. "The lease situation, the medical thing. Take your pick." "None of those are the reason either," he said. She held his gaze for a moment longer than was comfortable. "You don't know that." "I know people who make decisions purely for practical reasons," he said. "They don't usually turn down the first $50 tip." She picked up a cleaning cloth and went back to work. "Maybe I'm just difficult." "Yes," he said, and there was something in it that was so free of sarcasm that it landed as a kind of compliment, and she wasn't entirely sure what to do with that. He left at 7:10, same as always. She stood in the quiet kitchen for a moment, cloth in hand, and made herself think about the grind adjustment and not about anything else. Yeah, the text came again on a Friday, 6 weeks after the first one. Different number this time, but the same quality of message. Stripped down, functional, with no interest in being traced back to anything. He's not what he's showing you. Check the Kellerman account. She stood on the sidewalk outside the building where she'd gone to drop off a specific roast for a Saturday meeting, phone in hand, in the November cold, and read it twice. She didn't respond. Same as the first time. But this time she did something she hadn't done before. She went home and sat down at her laptop and typed the Kellerman name into a search engine and spent 40 minutes reading things that were mostly corporate filings and merger announcements and real estate transfers, the kind of information that was technically public and in practice unintelligible unless you knew what you were looking at. She didn't know what she was looking at. What she knew was this. The Kellerman Group had transferred a significant real estate holding to a Moretti subsidiary 14 months ago. The transfer price was listed. The assessed value was not close to the transfer price. The gap between them was the kind of gap that meant something. She didn't know yet what it meant. She closed the laptop and made tea she didn't drink and went to bed too early and lay there staring at the ceiling. She thought about what Claire had said. Discretion here is not a legal concept. It's a survival one. She thought about the way Lucien had said Vero, the careful tone, the specific weight of it. She thought about the man who'd handed her the envelope. No company name, no markings, gone before she could have asked him anything even if she'd wanted to. She thought about her mother's lesson. You gave pain an inch, and it took everything. She didn't bring it up for another week. She let the Saturday meeting happen and the Monday briefing and the Wednesday working lunch where she moved in and out of a room with 5 men she now knew by coffee order and the particular angle of their tension, and she held what she knew the way you hold something fragile, carefully, aware of it without squeezing. Then Marcus Reeves stopped her in the corridor. He did it the way he did most things, with a kind of casual precision that was really just threat wearing different clothes. He stepped out of a doorway as she was passing and said her name, and she stopped and turned, and he was already too close, occupying more of the corridor than he needed to, a move so practiced it was probably unconscious. "Ms. Hart," he said. "Settling in all right?" "Fine," she said. "Good coffee this week," he said. "Better than usual." "Thank you. Lucien speak highly of you." He said it in a tone that made it sound like information he was sharing. It wasn't. It was a test, the first of several she'd realize later. "Says you've got a good eye." "I've got a good palate," she said. "Different thing." He smiled. It didn't reach anything behind it. "Sure." He glanced at the tray she was carrying. "Long hours. Must take some adjusting." "I adjust fine." "I imagine you hear a lot," he said, "in your line." There it was. She'd been waiting for it since he'd stepped out of the doorway. "I hear coffee orders," she said. "I tune the rest out. Goes with the job." "Smart," he said, and there was a flatness to it that meant he hadn't decided whether he believed her yet. "Very smart." He let her pass. She didn't speed up. She was aware of him watching her back all the way to the kitchen door, and she walked at exactly the pace she would have walked at if she'd had nothing on her mind, which was the one skill from years of service work that turned out to be useful in an entirely different context. Inside the kitchen, door closed behind her, she set the tray down and stood very still for a moment and breathed through it. Marcus Reeve was not a man who made casual conversation. She'd learned that in the first 2 weeks. Every interaction he had was a transaction, What he'd taken from this one, she didn't know yet. What he'd given her was the knowledge that she was being watched more carefully than she'd realized. She texted the unknown number. Just 3 words back. Who are you? No response. She hadn't expected one. Well, she was cleaning the machine at 7:30 on a Thursday night when Lucien came in. Not unusual. He often worked late and came in for a last coffee that she'd started prepping automatically at 7 because the pattern was reliable enough by now to count on. What was unusual was the state of him. His jacket was off. That was the first thing. She'd never seen him without it. His shirt was still pressed, but there was a tension in his shoulders that his posture was working to manage and not fully succeeding. There was something at his jaw, a tightness. Not the controlled variety. He sat on the stool she kept near the prep counter and picked up the cup and didn't drink it for a moment. She kept working. She didn't ask. The Vero negotiation is falling apart, he said. Not to her specifically, more like saying it aloud to confirm that it was real. She rinsed a portafilter. I don't know what that means. It means 6 months of work is unraveling because someone decided a handshake agreement wasn't worth honoring. He set the cup down. Someone on my side of the table. She looked at him then. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the middle distance again. That look she recognized, except it wasn't the patient animal kind of look tonight. Tonight it was something that had been through a specific kind of exhaustion that wasn't physical. You know who, she said. I have a strong suspicion. A pause. Suspicions in my line of work have a particular cost if they're wrong. She picked up the cup, took it to the machine, pulled a fresh shot, set it in front of him. He looked at it, then at her. You made another one. The first was sitting too long. The extraction goes wrong after 10 minutes. She leaned against the counter. Is this the part where you remind me that I tune things out? Something in his face shifted. I wasn't going to. Reeves stopped me in the corridor last week, she said. It came out flat and even. She'd decided to say it while she was saying it, which was not how she normally operated, and she registered the decision the way you register a misstep. Too late to correct, only able to watch where it lands. Lucian's stillness had a different quality immediately. It wasn't the thinking kind. It was the kind that happened when information arrived that had been expected and dreaded simultaneously. What did he say? He said. Nothing specific. He was taking my temperature. She crossed her arms. I passed, I think, but I'm not sure what I was being tested for. Lucian looked at her for a long moment. She could feel something happening behind his eyes that she didn't have full access to. A calculation, maybe, or something that had been sitting near a decision and had just been pushed slightly closer. Evelyn, he said, and it was the first time he'd used her first name. Not Ms. Hart, her name. It landed differently than she expected. How much do you actually know about what this company does? She looked at him. She thought about the Kellerman account, the transfer price and the assessed value and the gap between them, the unknown number. He's not what he's showing you. She thought about the answer she should give and the answer that was true and the distance between them. Enough to know the question matters, she said. The silence stretched, and then his phone rang. He looked at it and something moved across his face so fast she almost missed it, a flash of something that was close to dread. And he stood, cup still mostly full, jacket off the back of the stool in one motion. Don't leave the building tonight, he said. He was already moving toward the door. Claire will arrange a car. Use it. Lucienne. But he was already through the door and she heard his footsteps in the corridor, faster than his usual measured pace, and then the elevator, and then nothing. She stood in the kitchen alone. On the counter, his coffee was still steaming. She looked at it for a moment. Then she took out her phone and pulled up the unknown number and stared at it. The building felt different around her. The same equipment, the same hum of climate control, the same 42 floors of dark glass. But something had shifted in the air the way air shifts before weather, some pressure change that your body registers before your mind catches up. She typed, I need to meet. This time, after 43 seconds, the reply came. Tomorrow. The address below. Come alone. Tell no one, especially not... And then it stopped. Mid-sentence. Like the person on the other end had... The message sat there on her screen. Unfinished. Mid-sentence, cut off like a wire, snipped clean. Tell no one, especially not who. She stared at it until the screen dimmed, and then she pressed her thumb to it to keep it lit and stared at it some more. The kitchen hummed around her. Lucien's coffee had gone cold. She hadn't touched it. She typed, especially not who. Nothing came back. She waited 11 minutes. She knew it was 11 because she watched the clock on the microwave above the warming drawer and counted the minutes. The way you count things when your mind needs somewhere to put itself. At 11 minutes, she put the phone in her pocket and took Claire's offered car and went home. She didn't sleep. Not really. She lay on her back in the specific dark of her apartment and thought about gaps. The gap between the Kellerman transfer price and the assessed value. The gap between what Lucien showed her and what Reeve had implied she wasn't seeing. The gap in that message. The thing cut off before it arrived. At 4 a.m, she got up and made coffee and sat at her kitchen table and thought about what she actually knew versus what she'd been shown, and the distance between those two things was longer than she wanted it to be. The address came in a second message at 6:12 the following morning. No continuation of the cut-off sentence. No explanation, just a street address in the garment district and a time, 11 a.m., and nothing else. She went. The building was a narrow walk-up between a fabric wholesaler and a parking structure, the kind of building that existed in a city's in-between spaces, too ordinary to notice and too permanent to disappear. The buzzer for Unit 4 had no name next to it. She pressed it and the door clicked open immediately, which meant she'd been watched arriving, and she climbed 3 flights of stairs that smelled like old radiator heat and took her time doing it. The woman who opened the door to Unit 4 was someone Evelyn had never seen before, and would not have been able to describe later in terms that went beyond the structural facts of her. Late 40s. A stillness about her that wasn't calm. That was the same category of thing as Lucien's controlled quality, but with a different source. Where Lucien's control read as something chosen and maintained, this woman's stillness read as something that had been burned in. Evelyn Hart, the woman said. You've got me at a disadvantage, Evelyn said. Yes. The woman stepped back and let her in. That was deliberate. Come in. The apartment was nearly empty, a table with 2 chairs, a laptop on the table, closed, a coffee maker on the kitchen counter that was the kind of cheap automatic machine that said this space was temporary. Everything about the space said temporary. Evelyn looked at the walls, at the bare hooks, at the single window with a view of the parking structure's concrete face. Who are you? She said. My name doesn't matter right now, the woman said. What matters is what I'm going to show you and what you decide to do about it. She pulled out the chair across from the laptop. Sit down. I'll stand. A pause. The woman looked at her and made some small internal adjustment to whatever approach she'd planned. All right, she said. She opened the laptop, turned it to face Evelyn. You know what the Kellerman account is. It wasn't a question. Evelyn looked at the screen. It showed a document, a financial transfer record, dense with figures and routing numbers, and subsidiary names that were the corporate equivalent of nesting dolls, each one containing another and another, until the original source was buried 6 layers down. I looked it up, Evelyn said carefully. I found the public filing. The public filing is the clean version, the woman said. She reached across and scrolled. This is what wasn't filed. She let Evelyn look. The Kellerman transfer was structured to move approximately $19 million through 4 intermediary entities into a fund that is used to pay people who make problems disappear. Not metaphorically. She paused. The last payment from that fund was 11 days before a federal witness named Daniel Cho stopped being available to testify. The radiator knocked. Outside, a delivery truck was backing up, that familiar rhythmic beeping, the sound of ordinary things in ordinary motion. Evelyn looked at the screen. She read the numbers the way she'd learned to read anything she didn't fully understand, slowly, without jumping to the interpretation, looking for what was actually there rather than what she'd been primed to see. Who made this payment? She said. The authorization chain runs through 3 layers, the woman said. But at the top of it, she scrolled again, a single line at the top of an internal memo, A signature block in a digital document that had been transferred somewhere it wasn't supposed to be transferred. Is Lucien Moretti. Evelyn looked at the name. She felt something happen in her chest that was physical before it was anything else. A tightening, a brief involuntary contraction, the body registering something before the mind has built the argument for it. This could be fabricated, she said. Her voice came out flat, steady. She was glad it came out that way. It could be, the woman said. That's the correct response. Most people wouldn't think to say it. She closed the laptop halfway. I have 3 additional corroborating sources I can show you. A recorded phone call, partial but sufficient. A bank transfer that routes through a Moretti-controlled account in Zurich. And a name. What name? Varro, the woman said. Evelyn went very still. Varro is not a rival, the woman said. Varro is a federal code name. It's the identifier for the operation that has been building a case against the Moretti organization for 22 months. The negotiation Lucien mentioned, the one falling apart, isn't between crime families. She looked at Evelyn steadily. It's a plea structure. Lucien has been negotiating a cooperation agreement, giving up mid-level operatives to protect the upper structure, to protect himself. The radiator knocked again. And Marcus Reeve, Evelyn said slowly. Reeve has been feeding information to Varro's opposing counsel, a private attorney working for the Salcedo Syndicate, who wants the Moretti cooperation agreement to collapse before it produces any indictments that touch their operations. Reeve is the leak. He's been the leak for 14 months. The woman paused. And he knows someone inside the building has been passing information to an outside party. He doesn't know it's me yet, but he's been narrowing it down. Evelyn looked at her. You work for the Morettis. I work in the building, the woman said. I've been working in that building for 9 years. My name, for your purposes, is Anna. What I tell you now I'm telling you because you walked into something you didn't understand, and the window for walking back out of it is closing. How close is it to closing? Reeve had 2 men follow you this morning, Anna said simply. They're outside right now. They didn't see you come in here, I made sure of that, but they know you came to this block. He's already made you as a variable he can't account for. In Reeve's framework, an unaccountable variable gets resolved. Evelyn felt the cold move through her, the way cold moves through old buildings, not in a rush through the specific gaps, finding every place the insulation was thin. Why are you telling me this? She said. If you work in that building and Reeve is already suspicious of you, then meeting with me makes your situation worse. Anna looked at her for a moment. Because you're the only person in that building Lucien talks to like a human being, she said. And what's coming is going to need him to trust someone completely. He doesn't trust anyone completely. He hasn't in 6 years. She paused. He might trust you. He barely knows me. He knows you better than you think, Anna said, and you know him better than you're admitting to yourself right now. Evelyn looked at the window, the concrete face of the parking structure, the flat gray sky above it. What's coming? She said. Tonight, Anna said. Reeve is meeting with the Salcedo attorneys tonight. He's going to hand over the cooperation framework. Every name Lucien offered, every timeline, every piece of the plea structure. That document goes to Salcedo. The cooperation agreement collapses. The federal case loses its primary cooperator, and Lucien Moretti goes from the man making a deal to the man getting buried under one. She paused. Salcedo has been waiting 22 months for this. They won't stop at the legal system. The meaning of that last sentence arranged itself in Evelyn's mind with a horrible clarity. He needs to know tonight, she said. He needs to know in the next 4 hours, Anna said. After that, Reeve is at the meeting and it's done. She turned the laptop fully closed. But here's the problem. Lucien has 2 people he trusts at the operational level. Reeve is one of them. Which means right now, his perception of reality inside that building is half constructed by the person trying to destroy him. He won't believe it without the documents. Reeve has already told him that any outside contact suggesting a leak in the organization is a Salcedo disinformation tactic, Anna said. He built that frame 3 months ago, very carefully. It's the kind of frame that makes the truth look like a lie. Evelyn stood at the window. She looked at the concrete and the gray sky, and she thought about Lucien in the kitchen last night, jacket off, the exhaustion that wasn't physical, the weight of a man carrying something that had been getting heavier for a very long time. She thought about the first morning, the measured footsteps, the $50 bill. To most people in this city, yes. She thought about what she'd said back to him. I'm not most people in this city. If I go to him, she said, not turning from the window, and Reeve has already built the frame, I'm going to look like exactly what Reeve told him to watch for. Yes, Anna said. So he'll shut me out. He might. Or Reeve finds out I went to him first and the situation accelerates. Also possible. She turned around. You've had 9 years in that building and you're asking me, 2 months in, to walk into that office and tell this man that his most trusted colleague is selling him to people who want to bury him, and you need me to do it in a way that bypasses the frame his most trusted colleague already built, using documents from a source I can't identify, and I need to do it in 4 hours. Anna met her gaze. Yes. That's a terrible plan, Evelyn said. It's the only one we have, Anna said. She walked out of the building at 11:47. She stood on the sidewalk and didn't look for the men Reeve had sent because looking would tell them she knew they were there. She looked at her phone instead. She scrolled to Lucien's direct line, not Claire's, his own, which he'd given her 3 weeks in with no explanation beyond in case of supply issues, and which she'd understood was not really about supply issues. She typed a message and deleted it, typed another and deleted it. She thought about the document, the authorization chain, the name at the top. She thought about what Anna had said. This could be fabricated. That's the correct response. The correct response, which meant it was also the response that could be used against her, the defense built in advance for the person who'd built the frame. She walked north. She walked like someone with somewhere to be, which she was. She went over it in her head while she walked. Not the arguments she'd make, not the words, but the architecture of the problem. Lucien's trust was the structure she needed to get through. Reeve had preloaded that structure with a specific kind of suspicion. The only way through a suspicion built on mistrust of outside sources was something that didn't come from outside. She stopped at a corner, waited for the light. If Reeve had been feeding information to Salcedo for 14 months, there were records. Not the kind Anna had. Those were too clean, too easily dismissed as fabricated. There were the other kind, operational details that only someone at Reeve's level would know, passed at times that correlated with specific decisions Salcedo had made. Pattern evidence. The kind of thing that was harder to construct than to find if you knew where to look. And she knew someone who would know where to look. She pulled up Claire's number. She thought about what Claire had said on day 1. Discretion here is not a legal concept, it's a survival one. Claire had worked for Lucien for 11 years. She would know the operational logs, the communication timestamps. She would know, if Evelyn asked the right questions, whether the pattern was there. She would also, if she was anything other than exactly what she appeared to be, know immediately what Evelyn was doing. And if Claire was part of it, if the frame went wider than Reeve, then this call ended everything. The light changed. Evelyn pressed call. It rang twice. Claire picked up. Miss Hart? I need to see you, Evelyn said. Not in the building. Now. A pause. 3 seconds? 4. Long enough for Evelyn to feel her pulse in her jaw. There's a cafe on Merchant Street, Claire said. I can be there in 20 minutes. The line went quiet. Evelyn kept walking. She was 4 blocks from the cafe when her phone buzzed. Not Claire, not Anna's number. A number she'd never seen before. The text was 2 sentences. Reeve knows you left the building this morning. He's moved the meeting up. She stopped walking. A man behind her clipped her shoulder and kept moving, didn't look back. The city continued around her, indifferent and loud and entirely unaware of the specific shape of what was collapsing. She looked at the message. Move the meeting up meant the 4-hour window was gone. She did the math in the space of 3 seconds. Claire was 20 minutes away. Anna's documents were back in a walk-up in the garment district. Reeve was already moving. And somewhere in a 42-floor building of dark glass, Lucien Moretti was sitting in the constructed reality his most trusted colleague had spent 14 months carefully building around him, and he was running out of time inside it without knowing it. She thought about what Anna had said. He might trust you. She pulled up Lucienne's direct line. Her thumb was over the call button, and then her phone rang in her hand. Not a call she was making, but one coming in. And the name on the screen wasn't Lucienne, and wasn't Claire, and wasn't any number she'd been texting. It was a number she'd blocked 2 years ago. It was her brother's number. Danny Hart had been out of her life by choice. Her choice. Made after the third time she'd cleaned up a situation she hadn't created and paid a price she hadn't agreed to. She'd changed her number once. He'd found it. She'd blocked him and moved, and that had been the end of it. She stared at the screen. It rang again. There was only one reason Danny Hart would unblock himself and find her new number. The same reason there was always only one reason with Danny. He was in something. Something that had a cost attached. And the cost was reaching her now, here, at this specific moment, which meant she let it ring 4 times. 5. She stood on the sidewalk with the city moving around her and her brother's number on the screen, and she let it ring until it stopped. Then she called Lucienne. It rang twice. Evelyn? His voice had the quality it got when something was already wrong. Not different in pitch, just compressed, the way a room sounds different when all the windows are closed. I need 10 minutes, she said. Not on the phone. In person. Right now. I'm in the middle of... Reeve moved his meeting up, she said. Whatever you think is happening today, it's happening faster than you think. Silence. 2 seconds. 3. 42, he said. My office. Use the east elevator. The line went dead. She was already moving. The east elevator required the keycard and a secondary code Claire had given her for after-hours access. A 6-digit sequence she'd memorized without trying because numbers were easier than most things. The elevator was faster than the main bank and opened directly into a reception area outside Lucien's office that was unmanned this late in the morning. The executive assistant's desk empty, the lights at half level. She went straight to the office door and knocked once and pushed it open without waiting. Lucienne was standing at the window, not sitting at the desk, standing at the floor-to-ceiling glass looking out at the city, and he turned when she came in with a look on his face that she'd never seen before. Not the controlled stillness, not the measuring attention. Something stripped down past both of those to whatever was underneath, and what was underneath looked like a man who had been managing an impossible weight for a very long time and had just felt it shift. Close the door, he said. She closed it. She crossed to the desk. She didn't sit. Reeve is meeting with Salcedo's attorneys today, she said. He moved the meeting up. He has the full cooperation framework, every name, every timeline. When that document reaches Salcedo, the plea structure collapses and you become the primary target instead of the primary cooperator. Lucien looked at her, not through her, not past her, at her, with that full precise attention, and this time it wasn't uncomfortable. This time it had the quality of something load-bearing. Where did you get this? He said. Someone inside the building, 9 years in. She's been watching Reeve for months. Name. She didn't give me one that mattered. She said to call her Anna. Something moved in Lucien's jaw, a muscle working. Describe her. Evelyn did. Compact, late 40s, the burned-in stillness, the temporary apartment with the cheap coffee maker. Lucien turned back to the window. He put one hand flat against the glass and stood like that for a moment, and she could see the tension in his back, the way his shoulder blades sat, the physical fact of someone absorbing something that was very heavy and deciding how to carry it. Ana Vasquez, he said quietly. She's been in risk compliance for 9 years. I haven't spoken to her directly in 4. He paused. She's not wrong about Reeve. Evelyn went very still. You already knew. I suspected, he said and turned around. Suspicion and knowing are not the same thing. I told you that. You told me they had different costs if you were wrong, she said. Are you wrong? He looked at her steadily. No. Then we have... She checked her phone. Less than 2 hours before that document changes hands. Yes. So what do we do? He pushed off the glass and moved to the desk. He picked up his phone and held it without dialing, looking at it the way you look at a tool you've used 1,000 times and are now not entirely sure you trust. If I call the federal contact directly and bypass the cooperation framework structure, I violate the terms of the current agreement, he said. That exposes me before there's any protection in place. And if you don't call and the document reaches Salcedo, then I have no protection regardless. He set the phone down. Reeve knew that. That's the architecture of it. He's built a situation where every move I can make inside the framework accelerates the problem. So go outside the framework, she said. He looked at her. You have the documents Anna showed me, she said. The authorization chain on the Kellerman transfer, the routing through Zurich, that's not cooperation framework material. That's independent evidence. You take that directly to the federal prosecutor's office, not the liaison, not through the current agreement structure directly. Before Reeve's meeting, you give them something they don't have yet, and you do it from a position of, that's not how this works, he said. I know it's not how it works, she said. How it works is broken. Reeve broke it 14 months ago, and you've been operating inside a compromised structure ever since without knowing it. She came around the side of the desk, closer than she'd stood to him before, close enough that she could see the specific quality of the exhaustion in his face, the depth of it. You need to go around it, now, today. His jaw was tight. He was looking at her with something she couldn't name yet, something that was in the vicinity of the way people look when someone says the true thing they've been avoiding saying to themselves. If I do that, he said slowly, Salcedo moves against the family before any protection is in place. My mother is in the Westchester house. My sister, I know, she said, which is why you make the call and you make the security arrangements at the same time, not sequentially, simultaneously. She held his gaze. You have the people for it. I've seen them. Use them. The office was very quiet. The city outside the glass was 40 floors below and entirely silent from up here, just light and movement and the shapes of things. Lucien picked up the phone. He dialed a number from memory. It rang once. I need the Bergen protocol activated, he said. Full perimeter, Westchester and the east side address. Now. A pause. I understand what I'm authorizing. Do it. He hung up. He dialed again. This time it rang 3 times. This is Moretti, he said. I need to speak to Hargrove directly. Not the liaison. Hargrove. A pause that stretched. Then wake him up. He looked at Evelyn while he waited. She looked back. There was something happening in the space between them that had been building for 2 months and was now simply present, acknowledged by neither of them in words because words would have been the wrong instrument for it. Hargrove, Lucien said. His voice had shifted. Not softer, but more direct, the professional gloss stripped off it. I have independent documentation of financial structuring related to the Cho matter. Routing through Zurich, authorization chain to source, 3 corroborating instruments. I'm prepared to deliver it directly to your office within the hour. In exchange, I need immediate provisional protection status and a conversation about restructuring the current agreement. A pause. Because the current agreement has a structural breach that your office is not aware of and which will become evident within approximately 90 minutes if we don't act before then. Another pause. Longer. I know what I'm asking. I'm asking anyway. He hung up. He stood behind the desk for a moment with both hands flat on the surface, head down, breathing. She watched the rise and fall of his shoulders. Hargrove will take the meeting, he said without looking up. Okay, she said. This is going to be a very bad day, he said. It was already going to be a bad day, she said. Now it's a bad day with a plan. He raised his head. Something in his face had settled. Not calm, nothing as gentle as calm, but a kind of terrible focus that was its own form of steadiness. Then, the office door opened. Marcus Reeve walked in without knocking. He stopped when he saw Evelyn. The stop was brief, less than a second, but she caught it. The adjustment that happened behind his eyes, the rapid reassessment of a situation that had not been what he'd arranged for. He looked at Lucien. I need a word, he said. You've got one, Lucien said. He didn't move from behind the desk. Reeve looked at Evelyn. The look was flat and held no performance in it. Privately. She stays, Lucien said. Reeve looked back at him. Something shifted in his posture. not aggressive, something more dangerous than aggressive. The particular stillness of a man doing very fast math. The Vero situation has developed, Reeves said. I've received information from the liaison that the federal contact has been compromised. We need to halt all cooperation framework activity immediately. Lucian said nothing. Reeve continued. His voice was level and practiced and entirely plausible. The concern is that documentation within the framework has been accessed by outside parties. If we continue forward in the current structure, we risk exposure of Marcus, Lucian said. Reeve stopped. How long? Lucian said. The room changed. Evelyn felt it. The specific way air changes when something that's been hidden stops being hidden. The pressure differential of it. Reeve looked at him. What? How long? Lucian said again. His voice was very quiet. The quiet that wasn't softness. With Salcedo. Reeve's face did something complicated. Not surprise. She didn't think much surprised this man, but a kind of internal recalibration, the expression of someone who has reached the point in a game where the concealment option is gone and is shifting to a new strategy in real time. You have no idea what you're talking about, Reeves said. 14 months, Luce. And said, That's what I'm thinking. The Dalton decision. That was the first one that didn't make sense to me, and I filed it and moved on because you were the one who brought me the analysis, and I trusted your analysis. He paused. I was wrong to trust your analysis. You're making an accusation you can't. I'm not making an accusation, Lucy said. I'm stating a fact. There's a difference. He came around the desk slowly, and Evelyn watched Reeve track the movement with the eyes of a man recalculating exit options. The meeting you moved up this morning, where is it? I don't know what you're... Where is it, Marcus? Reeve looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Evelyn, and the look he gave her was the clearest thing she'd seen from him. Not a threat, which was what she'd expected. Something colder than a threat. An assessment. The look of a man noting a factor he'd underestimated. You've been very busy, he said to her. I made coffee, she said. People talk. That's going to be a problem for you, he said. Not a threat. A statement of operational fact. That's enough, Lucian said, and there was something in his voice that stopped the air in the room. She'd never heard that particular register from him before, not controlled, not compressed, something that had gotten past both of those. Get out of my building. Reeve looked at him. Lucien, if you are in this building in 5 minutes, Lucian said, I will make a call that ends every arrangement you have with anyone, every protection, every back channel, every financial instrument Salcedo gave you. I will burn it all down, and I will do it before you reach the lobby. He was very still. You know I can. Reeves straightened his jacket. He looked at Lucian with something that might have been, in a different life, something like regret. Then he walked out of the office. The door didn't slam. He pulled it shut quietly, completely, which was somehow worse. Evelyn let out a breath she'd been holding since he walked in. She hadn't known she was holding it until she let it go. Lucian stood in the middle of his office. His hands were at his sides, and she could see the tendons in the backs of them, the controlled force of keeping them still. He's going to the meeting anyway, she said. Yes. You have, she checked, 70 minutes. I know. He moved to the desk and picked up his jacket. The documents Anna showed you, are they in the building? No, Garment District. I need them physically. Hargrove won't move on a verbal. I can go back. Not alone, he said flatly. Reeve made you in that corridor weeks ago. His people have been on you since this morning. If you go back to that building alone... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Then we go together, she said. He looked at her. That full attention again, close range, and she could see the cost of the last hour in his face, the specific wear of a man who has had a structural belief destroyed in real time and has had to keep moving anyway. This isn't your fight, he said. You said that before, she said. In the car, the first morning, you said the position was just about the coffee. It was. That's not what it is anymore, she said. We both know that. He held her gaze for a long moment. If we do this, he said, there's no version of today where it ends cleanly. Reeve has people. Salcedo has more. Going to that building and coming back with those documents means being visible in a way that, I know, she said. You don't know, he said. Not fully. Then tell me on the way, she said, and picked up her bag. He stood there for one more second. Then he took his phone off the desk and made a call that lasted 40 seconds. And by the time they reached the east elevator, there were 2 men in the lobby who hadn't been there when she arrived, and the car outside was different from the morning car, darker, lower, and the driver didn't wait for instructions before pulling out into traffic. They were 6 blocks from the garment district when her phone rang again. Danny's number. This time she answered. Eve. His voice had the texture it always had when things had gone wrong, slightly too even, the forced steadiness of someone who had been scared for long enough that fear had become a permanent background condition. I need you to listen to me. I'm listening, she said. She was watching the street outside. Lucien was watching her. I got picked up, Danny said. 2 nights ago. Not police. These guys, a breath rough at the edges. They knew your name, Eve. They said your name to me specifically. They said if I wanted to walk out, they needed to know where you were working. Her hand tightened on the phone. Did you tell them? She said. Silence. 2 seconds. 3. Danny, she said. Her voice came out very steady, which was a thing her body did when she was past a certain threshold of feeling, the same mechanism that kept her back pain off her face. I didn't have a choice, he said. They had... Eve, these weren't people you argue with. Lucien was watching her face. She looked back at him, and she saw him understand something from what he saw there, some shift in her expression that communicated what words would have taken longer to construct. When? She said. Last night, Danny said. I'm sorry, Eve, I'm sorry. She hung up. The car moved through traffic. Outside, the city was bright and ordinary and entirely indifferent. They know where I work, she said. They've known since last night. Lucien said something low and precise to the driver in a language she didn't speak. The driver's response was a single word. The car changed direction. The documents, she said. We're getting them, he said. Different route. She nodded. She looked at her hands in her lap. They were steady, which still surprised her sometimes, the body's capacity to remain functional while everything else was going sideways. Your brother, Lucien said. Not a question. We're not close, she said, but they found him. They found him, she agreed, which meant they'd been looking for leverage before this morning, before Reeve saw her leave the building. This had been built before today, the finding of Danny, the pressure applied, the information extracted, which meant someone had flagged her as significant before she'd flagged herself. She thought about the first text. Don't take it. Sent the morning after she'd spoken to Lucien in the car for the first time, before she'd taken the job. Someone had been watching her since before she walked into that building. The car stopped. They were in an alley she didn't recognize, 1 block off the garment district, the narrow kind that existed between buildings that hadn't been developed yet, still useful for nothing except being a space between things. 90 seconds, the driver said. Lucien's hand found her arm. Not grabbing, a contact, specific and brief, the kind of touch that communicated something without performing it. When we come out of this building, he said, whatever happens, you stay with my men. You don't separate for any reason. And you, she said. I'll be behind you, he said. That's not what I asked. He looked at her. In the alley light, his face had the quality of someone who had stopped managing their expression for a moment, and she could see the full weight of what he was carrying. The 6 years, the machine, the compromised framework, the 14 months of a man he'd trusted constructing the architecture of his destruction. She could also see the thing underneath all of that, the thing she'd been reading the edges of for 2 months and hadn't let herself name. Lucien, she said. I know, he said, quietly, like he'd been holding it as long as she had. He opened the car door. They moved through the alley and into the building and up the stairs, and Evelyn counted steps without meaning to, the automatic count of a mind that needed somewhere to put itself, while the rest of her was managing the particular cold focus that comes when everything has narrowed to a single point. Anna opened the door before they knocked. She looked at Lucien for a long moment. Something passed between them. Recognition, history, 9 years of proximity, and 4 years of distance, and whatever had caused it. "You came yourself," she said. "I need everything," he said. "Every document, now." She stepped back, let them in, went to the table and opened the laptop, and also, from under the table, a sealed envelope she hadn't shown Evelyn that morning. "There's something else," Anna said. She held the envelope but didn't give it to him yet. She looked at Evelyn, then back at him. "Something I didn't show her because I wasn't sure yet." "Sure of what?" Lucien said. Anna opened the envelope. She laid a single photograph on the table. Evelyn looked at it. It was a photograph taken from a distance, surveillance quality, slightly grainy but clear enough for the essentials. It showed two people outside a restaurant she recognized from the financial district. One of them was Marcus Reeve. The other one was Claire. The timestamp in the corner was 14 months ago, and the two of them were not meeting by accident. Their posture, their proximity, the document visible in Reeve's hand being passed across the table said everything about what this was. Evelyn thought about what Claire had said on her first day. Discretion here is not a legal concept. It's a survival one. She thought about the cafe on Merchant Street, the 20-minute window. The call she'd made that morning that had told Claire exactly what she knew and exactly where her head was. She thought about the route they'd taken to get here, the changed direction, the different car. She looked at Lucien. His jaw was stone. His eyes were on the photograph, and they had in them something she'd never seen there before. Not the controlled management of feeling, not the compression of it. The actual thing, raw and hard, and the photograph sat on the table between them and nobody spoke. Lucien picked it up. He held it by the edge, the way you hold something you're not sure you want to touch more of than necessary, and he looked at it for a long time. Long enough that Evelyn stopped watching his face and looked at the photograph instead, at the two figures outside the restaurant, at the document passing between them, at the timestamp in the corner that said 14 months ago in numbers that were very precise and therefore very final. Anna stood at the edge of the room and said nothing. She'd said what she had to say by laying the photograph down. The rest was not her conversation. "How long have you had this?" Lucien said. 3 weeks, Anna said. 3 weeks, he repeated. Not accusing, just measuring the distance between when she'd known and when he was standing here knowing. "I needed to be sure it wasn't a plant," she said. "Reeve has the capability to construct evidence. I had to verify the secondary sources first before I could trust what the photograph was telling me." "And you verified them?" "Yes." He set the photograph down. He straightened and looked at the wall behind Anna and breathed once. The kind of breath you take when you're organizing something large and unwieldy inside yourself. "Claire has been copying the Vero documentation," he said. It was a statement, not a question. He was building it out loud, the full architecture of it. Every meeting note, every agreement draft, everything that went through her desk. "Everything that went through her desk went to Reeve," Anna said, "and from Reeve to Salcedo's attorneys. For 14 months. The first transfer of documentation was 14 months ago, yes. But the relationship is older. The photograph is from 14 months ago. I believe the arrangement started before that." Lucien looked at Evelyn. She looked back. She thought about Claire's voice on the phone that morning. 20 minutes, the cafe on Merchant Street, clear and cooperative and exactly as reliable as she'd always been. "She didn't come to the cafe," Evelyn said. "She was going to tell Reeve I'd made contact." "Yes," Anna said. "Which means Reeve knew we were moving before we changed the route." "He knew you'd been to see me this morning," Anna said. "He knew you'd made contact with someone outside the building. He didn't know the specifics yet. The route change bought you the window you needed." She paused. "But that window is considerably smaller now than it was an hour ago." Lucien picked up his phone. He made a call that lasted 20 seconds. When he hung up, he looked at Evelyn with the full weight of someone who has made a decision and is past the point of reconsidering it. "Hargrove's office," he said. "Now. We bring everything." The federal building was 12 minutes away in a city that was conducting its ordinary afternoon in complete indifference to the thing collapsing and reconstructing itself inside a black car moving through its streets. Evelyn sat with the sealed envelope in her lap and the laptop bag at her feet and thought about Claire. 11 years. The organized precision of her. The way she'd said discretion here is not a legal concept on the first morning, and the particular knowledge that statement required, not the knowledge of someone warning her, but the knowledge of someone who understood the architecture of what she was walking into and had reason to want her to be careful inside it. Not protection. Management. She'd been managed from the first morning. She was the one who flagged me to Reeve, she said. Not a question. Lucienne looked at her. The first text, she said. Don't take it. That wasn't from someone trying to protect me. That was a test. They wanted to see if I'd contact Reeve or Lucienne or go to ground. She thought about it. When I ignored it and took the job anyway, that told them something. That I wasn't already connected to anyone. That I was a clean variable. Claire would have seen that as useful, Lucienne said. His voice had a quality she hadn't heard before. Not the control, not the compression. Something that had gotten past both of those and landed somewhere flat and exhausted. Someone new, no existing loyalties. She could monitor your proximity to me and adjust the information flow accordingly. She was in your organization for 11 years, Evelyn said. Yes. How? It was the wrong question to ask, maybe. Too direct, too close to the nerve of it. But she asked it anyway because she'd learned in 2 months that the wrong questions were the ones that mattered. Lucienne looked out the window. She was my father's hire, he said. She knew the organization before I took it. She knew where everything was. When I stepped in at 32 with half the knowledge I needed and all the responsibility, she was the one who... He stopped. She was indispensable, which is a condition people create when they want to be difficult to examine. Evelyn said nothing. She let it sit. My father trusted her completely, he said, which is a thing I should have examined more carefully instead of inheriting. The car stopped. Assistant United States Attorney Daniel Hargrove was 53 years old, broad-shouldered, and had the look of a man who had seen enough to stop being surprised by things while also never fully stopping being angry about them. He shook Lucienne's hand without warmth and looked at Evelyn with a measured curiosity that was the professional variety, noting her, filing her, not yet sure what category she occupied. They sat across from each other at a conference table that had the specific austerity of federal spaces, the kind of furniture that said this institution has been here longer than you and will be here after and has no interest in making you comfortable about that. Lucienne laid the documents out in a sequence. He spoke for 11 minutes without interruption. Hargrove's deputy made notes. Hargrove himself watched Lucienne the way experienced prosecutors watch people delivering information, not for what they said, but for what they did while they were saying it. When Lucienne finished, Hargrove looked at the documents. He turned 3 pages. He looked at the photograph. This was obtained how? He said. Internal surveillance, Lucienne said, by a member of my risk compliance team. Not by your direction. Not by my direction. Hargrove looked at him. You understand that the cooperation framework we've been operating under is now substantially complicated by the presence of a second undisclosed information breach. I understand that, Lucienne said, which is why I'm here with independent documentation rather than continuing to operate in a structure that's been feeding your opposition. The Reeve meeting, Hargrove said. You said it was moved up. He was in my office 40 minutes ago. I believe he's made contact with Salcedo's representation already. Hargrove looked at his deputy. Something passed between them that was the shorthand of people who had worked together for a long time. The deputy stood and left the room. Ms. Hart, Hargrove said, turning to her. You're employed by the Moretti organization. As a private barista, she said. He looked at her for a moment. You're aware of the nature of the information you've been involved in conveying today. I'm aware. And your interest in this outcome is... She looked at him steadily. I'd like to not get buried in someone else's arrangement, she said. I'd also like the man sitting next to me to not get buried in someone else's arrangement. Those are the same interest. Hargrove looked at her for another long moment. Then he looked at Lucienne. Give me the room, he said. 30 minutes. What? They sat in a hallway outside on institutional chairs and didn't talk for a while. The building moved around them, people with lanyards, the particular rhythm of a government office in a specific kind of controlled motion. Evelyn looked at her hands. Danny, she said. He'll be dealt with, Lucian said. He's not your problem to deal with. He became one when Salcedo used him to get to you, Lucian said. That makes him relevant. He paused. I'm not going to hurt him. I know, she said. And she did know, which was one of the things she'd been quietly organizing in the back of her mind through everything. The specific understanding of what Lucien Moretti was and wasn't. The gap between the thing people said his name like and the man who'd sat at a counter in a cafe and listened to her talk about coffee beans and left $50 not for the coffee, but for the honesty. He's been in trouble before, she said. He'll be in trouble again. Probably, Lucien said. I'm not going to clean it up for him anymore. No, Lucien said. You're not. She looked at him. He was looking at the wall across from them, the federal building beige of it, and his profile had the quality of someone who has come through something and hasn't yet looked back to see the shape of it. The Kellerman payment, she said. The Cho matter. He said nothing for a moment. That's not something I authorized, he said carefully. I know, she said. I looked at the authorization chain carefully. Your name was at the top of the document structure, but the specific payment authorization was routed through a subsidiary that was established before you took control. She paused. That's either very convenient or actually exculpatory. Hargrove's team will determine which, he said. What do you think is? He turned and looked at her. I think my father made decisions I've been cleaning up for 6 years, he said. I think some of those decisions I cleaned up knowingly, and some I cleaned up without knowing what I was cleaning. He held her gaze. I think the honest answer to your question is that I'm not entirely certain of the boundary, and that's the part I have to live with. It was the most honest thing he'd said to her in 2 months. Maybe the most honest thing he'd said to anyone in considerably longer. She could hear the cost of it in the flatness of his voice, the particular tone of something that had been compressed for a long time and was finally being said at full volume, even though it came out quiet. That's the right answer, she said. It's not a comfortable one. Comfortable answers are usually wrong, she said. I told you that on the first morning. You told me the house blend was better than the Guatemala. Same principle, she said. He looked at her for a moment, and something happened in his face that she'd been waiting to see for 2 months without knowing she was waiting for it. Not the controlled attention, not the measuring look. Something underneath both of those, unguarded and specific and entirely present. Then Hargrove's deputy appeared at the end of the hallway and said they were ready. The arrangement took 4 hours to reconstruct. Evelyn sat in a peripheral chair for most of it. Not at the table, not part of the negotiation, but present because Lucien had said she stays, and Hargrove had looked at her once and decided whatever he'd decided and not objected. She watched the process with the same attention she brought to a room full of people with coffee orders and unspoken needs. She watched the lawyers and the federal attorneys and the deputies cycle through the documentation. She watched Lucien navigate the thing he'd been navigating for 6 years, the reconstruction of something built badly on foundations his father had laid, with a precision and a patience that was, she thought, probably the most genuinely impressive thing she'd ever seen anyone do. Marcus Reeve was taken into federal custody at 3:17 in the afternoon, 40 minutes before the scheduled meeting with Salcedo's attorneys, based on a warrant Hargrove's office had been building for 8 months and had simply been waiting for the right instrument to execute. The Kellerman documentation was that instrument. Claire was placed on administrative hold at 4 o'clock. The process was quieter, a call to federal investigators, a request that she not leave the city, the particular bureaucratic language of an arrest that hadn't yet been formalized but was very much in progress. Evelyn learned this from Anna, who texted a 3-word message at 4:15. It's been handled. She looked at those 3 words for a moment and thought about 11 years. The precision, the indispensability. The morning she'd stood in the kitchen on the 31st floor and been warned about discretion by the person who'd most thoroughly violated it. There was something about that specific irony that sat in her chest like a stone, not exactly painful, just heavy with the weight of what it meant about the world. The Salcedo matter was more complicated and would be more complicated for considerably longer. Hargrove said this without euphemism. The Salcedo organization was not a problem that resolved in an afternoon. And the cooperation restructure meant that several things Lucien had agreed to under the previous framework would need to be renegotiated, and that process had its own cost and timeline. He said this to Lucien directly, and Lucien received it without flinching, the way he received everything difficult, fully, without performing the difficulty of it. At 6 o'clock, they were standing outside the federal building in the early dark of a November evening. The city had switched over to its nighttime version, the shift that happened while you weren't watching, lights different, pace different, the air colder and more definite. Lucien stood on the steps with his jacket collar turned up and looked at the street. "I need to get to Westchester," he said. "My mother." "Go," Evelyn said. "The Bergen Protocol. She's covered." He looked at her. "The what?" "You said Bergen Protocol in your office this morning when you made the security call. I don't know what it means exactly, but you said it like it was the serious option." She looked at him. "Is she safe?" "Yes," he said. "She's safe." "Then go see her anyway," Evelyn said. "She should hear from you directly, not from someone in a gray jacket with no company logo." Something in his face shifted at that, something that might in a different context have been almost a smile. "That's very specific advice. I've had some experience with information arriving through intermediaries today," she said. "It doesn't land well." He was quiet for a moment. He looked at her in the way he'd been looking at her for 2 months, except that this evening it had a different quality. Something settled in it, resolved, the look of someone who has stopped calculating. "Come with me," he said. She looked at him. "To Westchester," he said. "I'd like—" He stopped, started again. "I would like you there." It was the most uncertain she'd ever heard him. The please of it was in the structure of the sentence, the pauses, the starting over. This man who named problems with the flat certainty of someone who had learned to treat even difficult truths as simply things that existed, asking her something and not entirely sure of the answer. She thought about her apartment, the water stain on the ceiling, the drawer with the medical bill, the 3 flights of stairs. She thought about a morning in a cafe that smelled like burnt milk, and a man with measured footsteps who had sat at a cracked vinyl stool and ordered black coffee and looked at her when she spoke as if what she said had weight. "I need to change," she said. "I've been in these clothes since 5 this morning." "We'll stop," he said. "And I'm not staying in a guest room," she said. "If I'm coming, I'm there as—" She thought about how to say it. "As myself, not as staff. Not as someone being protected from information. As myself." He looked at her steadily. "I know what I'm asking," he said. "I'm not sure you do yet," she said. "But you're asking anyway." "Yes," he said. And the yes was full weight, no qualification. She picked up her bag. The Westchester house was an hour north, and Lucien's mother, Elena Moretti, 71, small and precise, and with eyes that took in a room the way her son's did, except hers had 60 more years of information in them, met them at the door and looked at Evelyn for a long moment before she said a word. Then she said, in English with an accent that had never fully left the city she'd come from before this one, "You're the coffee woman." "I am," Evelyn said. "Lucien mentioned you," she said, 3 times in 2 months. That's more than he mentions most people." "Mama," Lucien said. "I'm making dinner," she said, and turned and walked back into the house. And there was something in the way she did it. The complete absence of drama about it. The simple assumption that this was what was happening now. That was more welcoming than any formal greeting. Evelyn looked at Lucien. He looked back with an expression that said clearly he had not known his mother was going to do that and was not entirely unhappy about it. They ate dinner at a table that had the particular quality of family tables, worn at the edges, solid in a way that said decades of use. Elena talked about the garden and the neighbor's dog and the article she'd read about water temperature and coffee extraction that she'd been saving to discuss. She asked Evelyn 2 direct questions about her background, received 2 direct answers, and moved on without making anything of either. It was the most efficient form of acceptance Evelyn had encountered. After dinner, Lucien's mother went upstairs, and Lucien poured 2 glasses of something amber, and they sat at the kitchen table in the quiet of the house. "Anna," Evelyn said, "what happens to her?" "She'll be formally recognized as a cooperative internal source," he said. That has legal implications for her standing that she's been aware of and apparently waiting for. He looked at his glass. She approached me twice in the first 2 years after I took over. I wasn't ready to hear what she was saying. He paused. I was managing too many things to examine the foundations. She waited, Evelyn said. 9 years, he said. She waited for a moment when the evidence was complete enough to be undeniable, and for a person she thought could carry it to me without getting lost in the architecture. He looked at her. She chose well. Evelyn turned her glass in her hands. Danny, she said. There's nothing on him, Lucian said. The Salcedo contact was coercive. He'll be moved to a different location for a few weeks until the immediate situation settles. After that, he left it open. After that, he makes his own choices, she said. I'm not responsible for what he does with them. No, Lucian said. You're not. She looked at him across the table. The kitchen was warm and the house was quiet around them, and outside the window there was nothing but darkened trees and the specific silence of a place far enough from the city that the city didn't reach. Tell me something true, she said. He looked at her. What? Something you haven't said to anyone, she said, in the 6 years or longer. He was quiet for a moment. He looked at his glass, and then at the table, and then at her. I don't know if the business I've built legitimately is enough to justify what I inherited, he said. I've spent 6 years trying to make it enough, trying to build something clean on top of something that wasn't. And I don't know. He stopped. I don't know if that's possible or if I've just been building a better-looking version of the same thing. She held his gaze. What do you want it to be? Something I don't have to be ashamed of, he said. Something I could describe plainly to someone who didn't already know what it was. He paused. Something I could describe to you and have you look at me the way you're looking at me right now. She didn't look away. That's what I've been doing for 6 years, he said, trying to get to a place where that was possible. And now, she said, and now Hargrove has the documentation and the cooperation structure is being rebuilt and the Salcedo problem is a federal matter and Reeve is in custody and... He exhaled slowly. And for the first time in 6 years, I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. That's not a bad problem, she said. He looked at her. Not knowing what comes next, she said. That's a different problem than the one you had this morning. She leaned forward slightly. This morning the problem was that everything was decided for you by a structure someone else had corrupted. Now it isn't. That's not comfortable, but it's not the same thing. He looked at her for a long moment. The kitchen was very quiet. You said something to me once, he said. The first week. I asked why you turned down the $50, and you said that's not how things work. And I asked how things work. And you said you pay for what you get. I remember, she said. I've been thinking about that, he said. What I've gotten. What I owe for it. You don't owe me anything, she said. That's not what I mean, he said quietly. I mean what I owe, in general. The version of things where what you take has a cost, and what you're given has a cost, and you don't get to pretend otherwise. He looked at her. My father spent his life pretending otherwise. I've spent 6 years trying to pay a debt I inherited without being sure I could ever clear it. And what you said, it's the simplest version of the thing I've been trying to work out. You pay for what you get. It's the rule, she said. It's the only rule that matters, he said, and I've been running an organization for 6 years that was built on the idea that it didn't apply. She looked at him. The table between them was worn and solid, and the glasses were half empty, and outside the November dark was complete and total. Then change the organization, she said. You started 6 years ago. Keep going. It's not that simple. I know it's not simple, she said. I didn't say simple. I said keep going. She looked at him steadily. You know how to do it. You've been doing it. The problem was that people inside the structure were working against it. That problem is smaller now than it was this morning. He was quiet. I'll tell you something true, she said. He waited. I've been taking care of myself since I was 17, she said. Badly sometimes. Making the wrong call sometimes. But always for myself, on my own terms, with my own reasoning. She looked at her hands on the table. I came to work for you because of the money and the medical bill and the lease situation. Those were real reasons. But they weren't the only reason. She looked up. I came because you looked at me. On that first morning. You looked at me like what I said had weight, and like I was a person who was fully there, and not a function that happened to be standing behind a counter. I've been working service jobs for 8 years, and I can count on one hand the number of times anyone looked at me that way. He said nothing. He was very still in the way he was still when something was landing. That's not a declaration, she said. I'm not... She paused. I'm saying I had reasons beyond the practical ones. And I've been honest with you about most things, so I should be honest about that too. Most things, he said. I didn't tell you about the Kellerman search immediately, she said. I sat on it for a week. You were processing it. I was scared, she said. That's more accurate. Of me. Of the gap, she said, between what I'd been seeing and what that document suggested. She looked at him. I told you before I'd need to see clearly. I needed to see clearly. And now, he said. She looked at him across the worn table in the warm kitchen in the quiet house. Now I see clearly, she said. He reached across the table, not dramatically. He simply moved his hand and let it rest near hers, close enough that the contact was available, offered, not assumed. She looked at his hand and then at his face. She turned her hand over. They sat like that in the kitchen in the quiet for a long time, not talking, not needing to. Outside the window, the dark was complete, and the city was an hour away, and between here and there was enough distance to breathe. 3 weeks later, she was standing in the kitchen on the 31st floor of the Moretti Tower, different from before in small ways that added up to something. The Hayashi brothers had been replaced on the meeting schedule, the East Elevator had a new access protocol, the corner office that had been Claire's was being renovated, and she was calibrating the grind on the new beans that had arrived from a roaster in Portland that she'd been wanting to try for 6 months. Anna came in at 7:20. She did this now, stopped in before the day started, took a cup, stood at the window for a few minutes. She didn't talk much during these stops, which suited Evelyn fine. The Salcedo indictments came down this morning, Anna said, looking out the window. Hargrove's office. I saw, Evelyn said. 16 counts, including the Cho matter. Evelyn ran the shot, set the cup near Anna without ceremony. And Reeve, she said. Cooperation agreement of his own, Anna said. She picked up the cup. He's going to spend a long time being useful to people who don't particularly like him. She paused. It's probably what he deserves. Evelyn thought about Reeve in the corridor. That's going to be a problem for you, the operational clarity of it. The man who had spent 14 months dismantling the foundation while living in the building. And Claire, she said. Anna was quiet for a moment. She was with the organization for 11 years, she said. She believed, I think, that what she was doing was a kind of management, that Lucienne was going to make changes that would destabilize something she'd spent 11 years maintaining, and she stopped. She was protecting what she knew, which is the most dangerous reason to do anything. Evelyn looked at her. Do you believe that? That it was about protecting what she knew? I believe it's the version she told herself, Anna said. Whether it's true is a different question. She finished the coffee, set the cup down. The honest version is that she was paid very well and had grown accustomed to being paid very well. The rest is story. She left at 7:30. Evelyn was cleaning the portafilter when Lucienne came in at 6:45, same as always. The cup was in the warming drawer. He picked it up without looking, the motion absorbed by now into the architecture of how the morning worked. He stood at the window and drank, and she finished the cleaning, and for a few minutes the kitchen had the particular quality of two people occupying a space comfortably, without performance. The Portland beans, he said. Too light for the double pull, she said. But the pour-over is right. The Hayashi brothers will appreciate that. They'll comment on the grind regardless, she said. It's what they do. He turned from the window. He looked at her across the small kitchen with the morning light coming through the glass behind him, and something in his face had the quality she'd been watching slowly become the default. Not the controlled management, not the compression, but the thing that was actually him, present and specific and no longer working to stay hidden. "The Portland meeting is next month," he said. "I'd like you to come." "The Portland roaster is coming here," she said. "I scheduled it with Claire." She stopped. "With the new assistant," he said. "Claire's replacement starts Monday." "I'll reschedule it," she said. "Or you could come to Portland," he said. She looked at him. "The meeting is a week long." "The meeting is 3 days," he said. "The other 4 are optional." She pulled the next shot, watched the extraction, thought about Portland in December, which she'd never seen, thought about 4 optional days and what they implied. "I'll need someone to cover the Thursday standing orders," she said. "Anna said she'd help," he said. She looked up. "You asked Anna before you asked me." "I was optimistic," he said. She looked at him for a moment. He was watching her with that full attention, and she thought about the first morning, the measured footsteps, the flat click of the door. The $50 left on a counter for $4 worth of coffee and an honest opinion about beans. She thought about everything between that morning and this one, the weight of it, the cost of it, the specific shape of what had been lost and what had been found, and what was still being built in the careful way you build things when you understand that foundations matter. "Portland," she said. "Portland," he said. She slid the cup across the counter. He picked it up. Outside the window, the city was doing what the city always did, indifferent and loud and full of its own business, 40 floors below and entirely unaware of the specific small fact of 2 people standing in a kitchen in the early morning with a cup of coffee between them and nothing left to hide. It wasn't a resolution, exactly. It wasn't the kind of ending that tied itself in a bow. The Salcedo case would run for 2 more years. The cooperation restructure would cost Lucian 3 relationships he'd held since his father's time. The Moretti organization would change, was already changing, in ways that would take years to fully become what he was building toward, and there would be days when the weight of the gap between what it had been and what he was trying to make it would be too heavy for any single morning to carry. Danny would be in trouble again. She knew that. She'd answered his call exactly once, after the federal matter settled, and said what she needed to say, and then said goodbye and meant it. He was his own story, and she was done being a chapter in it. Anna would stay in the building. She'd moved from risk compliance into something that didn't have a title yet, but functioned as the thing she'd always been doing, watching the foundation, reading what was there rather than what someone wanted her to see. She drank the pour-over without comment and stood at the window, and that was enough. And Evelyn would stay, not behind an invisible wall, not managed or protected or kept at the useful distance of a function that had become a habit. She would stay as herself, difficult and clear-eyed, and with strong opinions about grind profiles and the considerable amount of patience it required to build trust with a man who had been taught by decades of his particular life that trust was a structural weakness. It was, she thought, more than she'd walked in looking for. She hadn't walked in looking for anything. That was the honest version. She'd walked in because the cafe needed to be opened and the morning wouldn't wait. Everything else had arrived the way real things arrived, not announced, not arranged, through the ordinary door of ordinary days that turned out to be something else entirely once you were standing on the other side of them. She picked up the cloth and went back to work. The city moved below them. The morning held.